Case 1. Robert John Bardo. In February 2000, a 19-year-old high school dropout from Tucson paid a private investigator $250 to obtain an address from the California Department of Motor Vehicles. The address belonged to Rebecca Schaeffer, a 21-year-old actress starring in the CBS sitcom My Sister Sam. 8 days later, on July 18, 1989, Robert John Bardo used that legally purchased information to travel to her West Hollywood apartment and shoot her once in the chest with a .357 Magnum revolver. The state of California had sold him his victim's home address for the price of a used appliance. Bardo had been stalking Schaeffer for 3 years. He had written her letters, traveled to the Warner Brothers studio lot to meet her, and become increasingly obsessed with the young actress he would never actually know. When he saw her film a romantic scene in the movie Scenes from the class struggle in Beverly Hills, he became enraged. He later told police he felt she had lost her innocence and needed to be punished for it. He contacted a private investigator and paid $250 for the one piece of information that stood between fantasy and murder: her home address. Robert John Bardo, born January 2, 1970 in California, was the youngest of 7 children in a family marked by abuse and instability. He dropped out of Pueblo High School in Tucson and worked briefly as a janitor before becoming indigent. He had no romantic history, no stable employment, and no criminal convictions beyond prior arrests for trespassing. Those trespassing arrests stemmed from an earlier stalking campaign targeting actress Samantha Smith, a child star who had become famous for writing a letter to Soviet leader Yuri Andropov during the Cold War. Bardo had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and schizophrenia, but was non-compliant with medication. Those who knew him in Tucson described him as an erratic loner. He spent his days writing letters to actresses, constructing elaborate fantasies, and nurturing what he would later describe as an obsession with the unattainable. By 1989, that obsession had focused entirely on Rebecca Schaeffer. Rebecca Lucille Schaeffer was 21 years old when she died. She was the only child of Dr. Benson and Dana Schaeffer and had moved to Los Angeles to pursue an acting career. By 1989, she was the star of My Sister Sam, a sitcom that had made her a recognizable face in American households. She was beloved in Hollywood, known for her kindness and professionalism. On the morning of July 18, 1989, she was waiting for a script delivery for The Godfather Part III. Her rising career and public visibility had made her a target. Bardo had written her letters for years, and she had responded politely through her publicist, never imagining that courtesy would be interpreted as encouragement. On July 18, 1989, at approximately 10:15 a.m., Robert Bardo arrived at Rebecca Schaeffer's apartment at 120 N. Sweetser Avenue in West Hollywood. He rang her doorbell. She answered. He later told police that he had brought a copy of The Catcher in the Rye and had intended to give it to her as a gift. Schaeffer was polite but firm. She asked him to leave, and he did. He walked around the neighborhood for an hour, returned to her apartment, and rang the doorbell again. When she answered the second time, he pulled the .357 Magnum from his bag and shot her once in the chest. She screamed. Neighbors heard the gunshot and called 911. Bardo fled on foot. He went to a nearby diner, threw his copy of The Catcher in the Rye onto the roof of the building, and took a Greyhound bus back to Tucson. Rebecca Schaeffer was found by a neighbor in her doorway. She died at the scene. The investigation moved quickly. Neighbors provided descriptions of a young man in a yellow shirt who had been seen at Schaeffer's door. LAPD detective Dan Andrews led the case. The next day, on July 19, 1989, Arizona police in Tucson stopped a young man who was walking recklessly into traffic. It was Robert Bardo. When officers questioned him, he confessed immediately. He told them he had killed Rebecca Schaeffer because he loved her and because she had betrayed that love by appearing in a romantic scene with another actor. He was arrested on the spot and extradited to California. Investigators recovered the .357 Magnum and the receipt showing that Bardo had paid a private investigator $250 to obtain Schaeffer's DMV address. Ballistics confirmed the weapon. The case was airtight. Bardo was charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances, specifically lying in wait. The special circumstances designation meant that if convicted, he would face either the death penalty or life in prison without the possibility of parole. Prosecutor Marcia Clark, who would later become nationally known for her role in the O.J. Simpson trial, was assigned to the case. Bardo's defense attorney, Stephen Moose, entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The trial began in September 1991 and was conducted as a bench trial, meaning Judge Dino Fulgoni would decide the verdict rather than a jury. The prosecution presented the private investigator's receipt, Bardo's recorded confessions to Arizona police, and eyewitness testimony from neighbors who had seen him at Schaeffer's door. Marcia Clark argued that Bardo's decision to hire a private investigator, travel across state lines, and return to Schaeffer's apartment after being turned away the first time demonstrated calculated planning that outweighed any claim of mental incapacity. The defense argued that Bardo's severe schizophrenia and bipolar disorder had rendered him unable to distinguish right from wrong. Bardo did not testify. On October 29, 1991, Judge Fulgoni convicted him of first-degree murder with special circumstances. On December 20, 1991, Judge Dino Fulgoni sentenced Robert John Bardo to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dr. Benson and Dana Schaeffer, Rebecca's parents, gave statements in court expressing the devastation of losing their only child. Judge Fulgoni noted that while Bardo's mental illness was real, the premeditation and calculated planning involved in hiring a private investigator, purchasing a weapon, and stalking Schaeffer for 3 years demonstrated a level of intent that could not be excused. Bardo filed multiple appeals throughout the 1990s, all of which were denied. His conviction and sentence were cemented by the mid-1990s. Robert John Bardo is 54 years old. He is incarcerated at Avenel State Prison in California, where he is serving life without the possibility of parole. His inmate number is H1-44102. In 2007, he was stabbed 11 times by another inmate, but survived. He has exhausted all appeals and will remain in prison for the rest of his life. Rebecca Schaeffer's murder became a catalyst for legal reform. The ease with which Bardo obtained her home address from the California DMV horrified lawmakers and the public. In 1994, Congress passed the Driver's Privacy Protection Act, which closed DMV records to public access and made it a federal crime to obtain or disclose personal information from motor vehicle records for unlawful purposes. The law came too late to save Rebecca Schaeffer, but it has protected countless others. The Rebecca Schaeffer Memorial Scholarship was established in her name. The $250 payment that gave Bardo access to her front door remains one of the most chilling details in the case. He carried the catcher in the rye with him, an echo of Mark David Chapman's assassination of John Lennon 9 years earlier. Rebecca Schaeffer was 21 years old, waiting for a script that would never arrive. Case 2. Stephen Mark McDaniel. The television reporter stood outside Barristers Hall Apartments in Macon, Georgia, interviewing a law school graduate about the disappearance of his neighbor, Lauren Giddings. The young man was calm, articulate, and cooperative. He told the reporter that Lauren was a wonderful person and that he hoped she would be found safe. Then the reporter said, "Police have just found a body in a trash can." The young man's face visibly dropped. His expression froze. The composure he had maintained throughout the interview shattered in an instant. The moment was broadcast live, and it became the most recognizable image of the case. Stephen Mark McDaniel was being interviewed, and he had dismembered Lauren Giddings in her bathtub, placed her torso in trash bags, and thrown it into the dumpster behind their apartment complex. He had filmed her through her window for months. He had stolen a master key to enter her apartment while she slept. He had strangled her and cut her body apart with a hacksaw, leaving a fragment of the blade inside her remains. Stephen Mark McDaniel was born on September 9, 1985, in Georgia. He was 25 years old when he killed Lauren Giddings. He had graduated from Mercer University School of Law and was described by classmates as socially awkward, quiet, and unsettling. He had been raised in a strict, overprotective household and had never dated or formed romantic relationships. He was unemployed and living off financial support from his family. He had no prior criminal record, no diagnosed mental illness, and no official history of violence. What he did have was a collection of digital videos he had secretly recorded by filming into Lauren Giddings' ground floor apartment window. He watched her. He studied her routines. He fixated on her every movement. When he learned she was planning to move away to begin her legal career, his voyeuristic obsession turned into rage. Lauren Giddings had just graduated from Mercer Law at age 27. She was studying for the bar exam. She was the beloved daughter of a Maryland family and had served as president of the Federalist Society at Mercer. She was weeks away from moving to another city to start her career as an attorney. She lived in a ground floor apartment at Barristers Hall, a complex popular with Mercer students. Her neighbor in the adjacent unit was Stephen McDaniel. She knew him from law school. He was strange, but she had no reason to believe he was dangerous. She did not know he had been filming her for months or that he had stolen a master key that gave him access to every apartment in the building. On the early morning of June 26, 2011, Stephen McDaniel used the stolen master key to enter Lauren Giddings' apartment while she slept. He strangled her in her bed. After she was dead, he carried her body to the bathtub and dismembered it with a hacksaw. He cleaned the bathroom with bleach, scrubbing away blood and evidence. He placed her torso in trash bags and carried it to the dumpster behind the apartment complex. He discarded his clothing. He left a fragment of the hacksaw blade inside her remains. Then he returned to his apartment and went about his day as though nothing had happened. When Lauren's friends became concerned that she had missed study groups and was not answering her phone, they contacted police and requested a welfare check. That request came on June 29, 2011, 3 days after her murder. Police searched the apartment complex and the surrounding area. On June 30, 2011, investigators found a torso in a trash bag in the dumpster behind Barristers Hall. It was Lauren Giddings. The discovery triggered a homicide investigation. Detectives interviewed residents of the complex, including Stephen McDaniel. During the search, a local news crew arrived and began conducting interviews. McDaniel inserted himself into the coverage, offering to speak on camera about Lauren's disappearance. It was during that interview that the reporter informed him that a body had been found. His face dropped. The reaction was captured on live television and would later be analyzed by investigators as the moment his facade cracked. McDaniel was arrested on July 1, 2011, initially for burglary related to the stolen master key. Investigators obtained a search warrant for his apartment and found women's underwear belonging to Lauren Giddings. Digital forensics recovered deleted videos from his computer, showing footage he had filmed through her window. His DNA was found on the trash bags that contained her torso. On August 2, 2011, he was charged with murder. Prosecutors prepared to seek the death penalty. McDaniel faced insurmountable evidence: the videos, the DNA, the hacksaw packaging found in his trash, the fragment of the blade left in Lauren's body, and his own recorded statements to police created a case with no credible defense. Rather than face trial and the possibility of execution, McDaniel accepted a plea deal. In exchange for pleading guilty to murder, the state agreed not to pursue the death penalty. On April 15, 2014, McDaniel appeared before Judge Howard Sims in a Macon courtroom. As part of the plea agreement, he was required to allocute, meaning he had to describe his crimes aloud in open court. He did so in a flat, emotionless voice, detailing how he had stalked Lauren, entered her apartment, killed her, and dismembered her body. Prosecutor David Cook presented the evidence. Defense attorney Floyd Buford acknowledged that no trial could change the facts. Judge Sims sentenced Stephen McDaniel to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Lauren's family expressed relief that they would not have to endure a trial. McDaniel filed an appeal in 2018, claiming ineffective assistance of counsel. The appeal was dismissed. He remains incarcerated with no realistic chance of parole in the foreseeable future. McDaniel is currently 38 years old and incarcerated at Hayes State Prison in Georgia. He will be eligible for parole in 2041 after serving 30 years. The Lauren Giddings Endowed Scholarship was established at Mercer University School of Law in her memory. The hacksaw blade fragment left inside her remains became one of the most disturbing pieces of evidence in the case. The live television interview, in which McDaniel's face visibly dropped when told a body had been found, remains a haunting moment in true crime history. It was the rare instance of a killer's mask slipping in real time, broadcast to thousands of viewers who had no idea they were watching a murderer react to the discovery of his victim. Case 3. Gareth Pursehouse. Forensic investigators examining the scene of Dr. Amy Harwick's death found something unusual in her Hollywood Hills home: a syringe filled with liquid nicotine. The dose was lethal. The nicotine had not been administered, but its presence revealed the level of planning that had gone into the attack. On February 15, 2020, at 1:15 a.m., Gareth Pursehouse broke into Harwick's 3-story home, disabled her security cameras, waited for her to return, and then attacked her. He strangled her, beat her, and threw her from the 3rd-story balcony. She landed on the ground below and was found by paramedics, unresponsive. She died at the hospital. Pursehouse had been fixated on Harwick for more than a decade, and a chance encounter at an industry event weeks before the murder had reignited a rage that had been simmering since their breakup in the early 2010s. Gareth Pursehouse was born in 1979 in the United Kingdom and later moved to California. He was 41 years old when he killed Amy Harwick. He worked as a software developer and photographer and had been married and divorced. He and Harwick had dated briefly nearly a decade before her death, but the relationship had ended badly. Harwick had filed 2 restraining orders against Pursehouse, citing his obsessive and unstable behavior. He had no major felony convictions, and to those who knew him professionally, he appeared financially stable and functional. But those who had been romantically involved with him described him as controlling, bitter, and unable to accept the end of relationships. By 2020, Pursehouse had been out of Harwick's life for years. Then, in early February 2020, the two ran into each other at an adult entertainment industry awards show. The encounter was brief and awkward. For Harwick, it was an unpleasant reminder of a difficult chapter in her past. For Pursehouse, it was the spark that reignited an obsession that had never fully died. At 38, Dr. Amy Harwick was one of the most prominent family and sex therapists in Los Angeles. She had authored books, appeared on television, and built a thriving practice helping clients navigate relationships and intimacy. She had previously been engaged to comedian and television host Drew Carey, though the engagement had ended amicably. She was beloved by her family and respected in her professional community. She lived in a modern 3-story home in the Hollywood Hills, a property she had chosen in part because it felt secure. she had installed security cameras and taken precautions. But those precautions were not enough to stop Gareth Pursehouse. When she ran into him at the awards show in February 2020, she told friends she was unnerved. She did not know he was already planning to kill her. On the night of February 15th, 2020, Pursehouse broke into Harwick's home by shattering a glass door. He disabled her security cameras before she arrived. He waited inside. When Harwick returned home, he attacked her. He beat her with blunt force, strangled her, and at some point during the assault, injected her with the syringe of liquid nicotine or attempted to do so. The exact sequence of the attack is unclear, but what is certain is that Pursehouse dragged or carried Harwick to the third-story balcony and threw her over the railing. She fell approximately 20 feet and landed on the ground below. Her roommate, who had been in another part of the house, heard screams and managed to escape through a window. The roommate ran to a neighbor's house and called 911, telling the dispatcher that Amy's ex-boyfriend had broken in and that Amy was hurt. Paramedics arrived and found Harwick under the balcony, gravely injured. She was transported to a hospital where she was pronounced dead. The cause of death was blunt force trauma consistent with a fall from height. Investigators found the syringe of nicotine inside the house, along with Purshouse's DNA under Harwick's fingernails, evidence that she had fought back. The roommate immediately identified Pursehouse as Harwick's stalker and ex-boyfriend. Police obtained a warrant and arrested Pursehouse at his home later that day. He was charged with first-degree murder and residential burglary with special circumstances. Bail was initially set at $2 million, which Pursehouse posted. He was released briefly before prosecutors successfully argued for a no-bail warrant, and he was rearrested and held without bail pending trial. The case moved slowly through the courts, delayed in part by the COVID-19 pandemic. The trial finally began in August 2023 in Los Angeles Superior Court. Judge George Lamelli presided. Prosecutor Victor Avila presented the evidence methodically. He introduced the syringe of nicotine, the DNA evidence, the disabled security cameras, the broken glass door, and testimony from the roommate who had heard Harwick's screams. He detailed the 2 restraining orders Harwick had filed against Pursehouse years earlier, and the chance encounter at the awards show that had occurred just weeks before the murder. The defense, led by Purshouse's attorney, argued that Harwick's death had been accidental, the result of a struggle or panic, rather than intentional homicide. The defense claimed Pursehouse had gone to the house to talk, and that events had spiraled out of control. The jury rejected the defense's claim. On September 28, 2023, they convicted Gareth Pursehouse of first-degree murder and residential burglary with special circumstances. On December 6, 2023, Judge George Lamelli sentenced Pursehouse to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Drew Carey attended the sentencing hearing and gave an emotional statement about domestic violence and the danger posed by stalkers who refuse to let go. Harwick's family also spoke, describing the loss of a brilliant, compassionate woman whose life had been stolen by a man who could not accept that she had moved on. Pursehouse, now 45, is incarcerated at North Kern State Prison in California, where he is serving life without the possibility of parole. He has no chance of release. Dr. Amy Harwick spent her career helping people build healthy relationships and escape abusive ones. She was killed by a man she had dated for a brief period nearly a decade earlier. A man who had been out of her life for years until a chance meeting reignited his obsession. The syringe of liquid nicotine remains one of the most chilling pieces of evidence in the case, a weapon that was never used, but that revealed the depth of Purshouse's planning. The third-story balcony, the disabled cameras, the shattered glass door, and the DNA under her fingernails all told the story of a woman who fought for her life and lost. Case 4, Michael Gargiulo. On the evening of February 21st, 2001, actor Ashton Kutcher arrived at a small bungalow in Hollywood to pick up his date, a 22-year-old fashion student named Ashley Ellerin. Kutcher rang the doorbell. No one answered. He called her phone. No response. Concerned but not alarmed, he walked around to a window and looked inside. He saw what appeared to be red wine spilled on the floor near the entrance. Assuming Ellerin had left or had decided not to answer the door, Kutcher left. The red substance was not wine. It was blood. Ashley Ellerin was already dead inside the house, stabbed 47 times by a man who had been watching her for weeks. That man was Michael Gargiulo, a 24-year-old aspiring actor and handyman who had offered to fix Ellerin's heater and had used that access to learn the layout of her home and study her routines. Gargiulo would not be arrested for the murder until 2008, 7 years after Ellerin's death, when DNA evidence linked him to another victim who had survived his attack. Michael Thomas Gargiulo was born on February 15, 1976, in Illinois. By 2001, he was living in Los Angeles, working as an air conditioning repairman, bouncer, and aspiring actor. He was known in his neighborhood as the boy next door killer, a nickname he would earn after investigators determined he had used his trade as a handyman to gain access to the homes of multiple women. Gargiulo had been a suspect in a murder in Illinois before moving to California, but he had never been charged. He was charming, helpful, and skilled at ingratiating himself with neighbors. He offered to fix appliances, repair broken heaters, and help with small tasks. What he was actually doing was mapping the vulnerabilities of their homes and identifying potential victims. Ashley Ellerin was one of several women Gargiulo targeted over the course of nearly a decade. Ashley Ellerin, a 22-year-old fashion student, lived in a small bungalow in Hollywood and was preparing for a date with Ashton Kutcher on the night of February 21st, 2001. She and Kutcher were casual acquaintances, and she was looking forward to the evening. Gargiulo lived nearby and had offered to fix her heater weeks earlier. She had accepted the help, unaware that the friendly neighbor was obsessively watching her. Gargiulo began stalking her, sitting in his car outside her home and tracking her movements. On the night she was supposed to meet Kutcher, Gargiulo broke into her house while she was showering and launched a blitz attack. Ashley Ellerin was stabbed 47 times. The attack was savage and frenzied. Gargiulo stabbed her in the chest, neck, and torso, inflicting wounds that were clearly intended to kill. After she was dead, he posed her body in a sexually suggestive position, a detail that would later help investigators understand the psychosexual nature of his crimes. Gargiulo then left the scene, slipping away into the night. When Kutcher arrived later that evening and saw the blood through the window, he assumed it was spilled wine and left. Ashley's roommate discovered her body the next morning and called 911. The crime scene was horrific. Investigators found a boot print and extensive blood evidence, but they had no immediate suspects. The case went cold. It would remain cold for 7 years. In 2008, a woman named Michelle Murphy fought off an attacker who had broken into her Santa Monica apartment and attempted to stab her. Murphy survived, and DNA evidence collected from the scene matched samples from the Ashley Ellerin crime scene. That DNA belonged to Michael Gargiulo. On June 6, 2008, police arrested Gargiulo in Santa Monica and charged him with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The investigation revealed that Gargiulo had killed at least 2 women and attempted to kill a third, all of them young, all of them targeted, after he had used his skills as a repairman to gain access to their homes. The trial began in May 2019 in Los Angeles Superior Court. Judge Larry Paul Fidler presided over the proceedings. Prosecutor Dan Ackerman presented a mountain of evidence, including DNA, witness testimony, and the pattern of behavior that linked Gargiulo to multiple victims. One of the most high-profile witnesses was Ashton Kutcher, who testified about arriving at Ashley Ellerin's home on the night of her murder and seeing blood through the window. Kutcher's testimony established the timeline and confirmed that Ellerin had been alive earlier that evening, preparing for their date. The defense, led by attorney Dale Rubin, argued that Gargiulo had been in a dissociative or fugue state during the attacks and could not be held fully responsible. The jury found the argument unconvincing. The evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. On August 15, 2019, the jury convicted Michael Gargiulo of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. On July 16, 2021, Judge Larry Paul Fiddler sentenced Michael Gargiulo to death. In his remarks, Judge Fiddler described the crimes as completely vicious and frightening. Gargiulo showed no remorse. Family members of the victims spoke about the devastation his actions had caused. Ashley Ellerin's mother described the loss of her daughter and the years of waiting for justice. Michael Gargiulo is 48 years old. He is incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison in California, where he sits on death row. He is also awaiting extradition to Illinois to face charges in a murder that occurred before he moved to California. Ashton Kutcher's proximity to the crime scene and his testimony at trial brought significant media attention to the case, but the story was ultimately about the women Gargiulo targeted and the trust he exploited. He offered to fix their heaters and air conditioners, and in return, he learned how to break into their homes and kill them. The boy next door turned out to be a serial killer. Ashley Ellerin was 22 years old, preparing for a date when she was stabbed 47 times by the man who had offered to fix her heater. Case 5. Richard Wade Farley. After killing 7 co-workers and wounding 4 others in a mass shooting at ESL Incorporated in Sunnyvale, California, Richard Wade Farley barricaded himself inside the building and held a SWAT team at bay for 5 hours. During the standoff, he made a series of demands. He wanted a sandwich. He wanted a soda. Negotiators brought him both. He ate, drank, and eventually surrendered. The absurdity of the demand, issued by a man who had just committed one of the deadliest workplace mass shootings in American history, revealed the narcissism and detachment that had driven Farley to load 98 pounds of weapons and ammunition into a motorhome and drive to his former workplace with the intent to kill Laura Black, the woman who had rejected him for 4 years. Black survived. 7 of her co-workers did not. Richard Wade Farley was born on July 25, 1948, in Texas. He was 40 years old when he carried out the attack. He had served in the Navy and worked as a software technician at ESL Incorporated, a defense contractor in Sunnyvale. Farley had been fired in 1986 for sexually harassing Laura Black, a young electrical engineer at the company. After his termination, Farley became consumed by Laura Black. He sent her more than 200 letters over the course of 4 years. He joined her gym. He stole her medical records. He followed her to restaurants and wrote detailed diary entries documenting her movements. He purchased multiple firearms and stockpiled ammunition. He fell into debt, struggling to pay property taxes and fund his weapons purchases. When Laura Black finally obtained a temporary restraining order on February 8, 1988, Farley interpreted it as a final rejection. 8 days later, he decided to kill her. Laura Black was an electrical engineer at ESL Incorporated. She was young, intelligent, and well-regarded by her colleagues. Farley had fixated on her shortly after she began working at the company, and despite her repeated rejections, he refused to accept that she was not interested in him. His harassment escalated over time, moving from unwanted letters to surveillance to outright stalking. Black reported Farley's behavior to ESL management, and the company fired him in 1986. But termination did not stop Farley. If anything, it intensified his obsession. He blamed Black for his firing and began to view her as someone who had wronged him. When she obtained a restraining order in early February 1988, Farley began planning his attack. The 7 people killed on February 16, 1988, were not Farley's primary targets. They were employees of the Human Resources Department and individuals who happened to be in Farley's path as he hunted for Laura Black. Their names were Wayne Williams, Joe Rigsby, Glenda Moritz, Ronald Doney, Lawrence Kane, Ronald Reed, and Helen Lamparter. All were adults. All were simply doing their jobs when Farley arrived. On February 16, 1988, at approximately 3 p.m., Richard Farley drove his motorhome to ESL Incorporated. Inside the vehicle were 98 pounds of firearms and ammunition, including shotguns, rifles, and handguns. Farley exited the motorhome, approached the building, and used a shotgun to blast through the glass doors at the entrance. He entered the building and began searching for Laura Black. As he moved through the offices, he shot anyone who got in his way. He killed 7 people and wounded 4 others. He found Laura Black and shot her in the shoulder. She survived, diving for cover and managing to escape further injury. Farley then barricaded himself inside the building. Hundreds of employees called 911 from their offices, trapped and terrified. SWAT teams surrounded the building, and a hostage negotiator made contact with Farley. The standoff lasted 5 hours. Farley demanded food and drink. Negotiators complied. At one point during the standoff, Farley told the negotiator that he had shot Black just to smile at her. Finally, after eating his sandwich and drinking his soda, Farley surrendered. He was arrested on site. Investigators had built an ironclad case. They recovered thousands of letters he had sent to Laura Black, detailed diaries documenting his stalking, and the arsenal of weapons he had brought to ESL. Survivors, including Black, provided testimony about the attack. Farley was charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. The trial took place in 1991 in Santa Clara County. Prosecutor Arthur Danner presented the letters, the diaries, the restraining order, and the eyewitness accounts. The defense argued that Farley had not intended to kill anyone, that he had gone to ESL to get Laura Black's attention and then commit suicide. The jury was not persuaded. The evidence showed clear premeditation, planning, and intent. Farley was convicted on all 7 counts of first-degree murder. On January 17, 1992, Richard Wade Farley was sentenced to death. The families of the 7 victims spoke in court about the devastation Farley had caused. Laura Black, who had survived the shooting, testified about the 4 years of terror Farley had inflicted on her life. Richard Wade Farley is 76 years old. He is incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison in California, where he has been on death row for more than 30 years. He has not been executed, and California's moratorium on the death penalty means he will likely die of natural causes in prison. The case became a direct catalyst for legal reform. In 1990, California enacted the first anti-stalking law in the United States, legislation prompted in large part by the Farley case and the failure of existing laws to protect Laura Black despite her repeated complaints. The law made stalking a criminal offense and provided legal mechanisms for victims to seek protection before violence occurred. 7 people died because Richard Farley could not accept that Laura Black was not interested in him. He sent her over 200 letters, joined her gym, stole her medical records, and when she finally obtained a restraining order, he responded with mass murder. The sandwich he demanded during the standoff, the casual way he ate while surrounded by SWAT teams, and his statement that he shot Black just to smile at her, all revealed a man utterly disconnected from the enormity of what he had done. Case 6. George Wesley Harris. When police found Mary Kay Wolfarth's body locked inside a storage unit in Akron, Ohio, in June 2019, investigators quickly determined that the person who had put her there had driven her car to the facility. unlocked the unit, stuffed her inside, and then gone about his day. Surveillance footage showed 73-year-old George Wesley Harris driving Wolfarth's vehicle into the storage facility parking lot, opening the unit and leaving. After locking his 68-year-old neighbor's body inside a sweltering metal box, Harris went grocery shopping. He paid his rent. He returned to the apartment complex where he and Wolfarth both lived and continued his routine as though nothing had happened. The murder was the culmination of a sustained campaign of harassment Harris had waged against Wolfarth over what he perceived as slights and grievances. She had been preparing to move out of the complex to escape him. She never got the chance. George Wesley Harris was born in 1947 in Ohio. By 2019, he was 73 years old, a retiree living in an apartment complex in Akron. He had a documented history of threatening and harassing neighbors, behavior severe enough that he had been evaluated for anger management. Those evaluations did not prevent the escalation of his fixation on Mary Kay Wolfarth, a fellow resident of the complex. Harris had become preoccupied with perceived slights, minor conflicts, and imagined grievances. His anger toward Wolfarth grew over time, fed by whatever resentments he had constructed in his mind. To those who knew him, Harris was an elderly man with rage issues. To Wolfarth, he was a dangerous presence she could not escape. Mary Kay Wolfarth was 68 years old, a retiree who had lived in the same Akron apartment complex as George Harris. She had tried to avoid him, but proximity made that difficult. Harris fixated on her, and the harassment escalated to the point where Wolfarth made plans to move out. She wanted to leave the complex and put distance between herself and the man who had made her life unbearable. She was in the process of preparing for that move when Harris decided to kill her. On June 19, 2019, George Harris cornered Mary Kay Wolfarth in the parking lot of their apartment complex. He attacked her with blunt force, beating her until she was dead. He then stuffed her body into her own car, climbed into the driver's seat, and drove the vehicle to a storage facility he had rented. He unlocked the unit, dragged or carried Wolfarth's body inside, and locked the door. The storage unit was not climate controlled. The summer heat would have made the space unbearable. Harris left Wolfarth's body inside and drove away. He went grocery shopping. He paid his rent. He acted as though nothing had happened. The banality of his actions after committing murder revealed a level of detachment that disturbed investigators. Wolfarth's family reported her missing when she failed to answer phone calls and did not show up for planned visits. Police began an investigation and quickly identified Harris as a person of interest based on the history of harassment and threats. Investigators obtained cell phone records and pinged Wolfarth's phone, which led them to the storage facility. Surveillance footage from the facility showed Harris driving Wolfarth's car into the lot and accessing the unit. Police obtained a warrant and opened the storage unit. Inside, they found Mary Kay Wolfarth's body. A search of Harris's apartment revealed blood evidence. Blood was also found in the trunk of Wolfarth's car. Harris was apprehended shortly after the discovery, found driving Wolfarth's vehicle. Harris was charged with murder and gross abuse of a corpse. The case went to trial in 2021 in Summit County, Ohio. The trial was conducted as a bench trial with a judge rather than a jury deciding the verdict. Prosecutors presented the surveillance footage, the blood evidence from Harris's apartment and the car, and testimony about Harris's sustained harassment of Wolfarth. The defense did not present a compelling alternative explanation. The evidence was clear. The judge found George Wesley Harris guilty of murder and gross abuse of a corpse. Harris was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. He showed no remorse in court. Wolfarth's family spoke about the loss of a woman who had simply been trying to live her life in peace and who had been killed by a neighbor who could not let go of imagined grievances. Harris, now 77, is incarcerated at Richland Correctional Institution in Ohio. He will be eligible for parole in 2034, after serving 15 years. Mary Kay Wohlfarth was 68 years old, a retiree preparing to move away from the apartment complex where George Harris had made her life a nightmare. She was beaten to death in a parking lot, stuffed into a storage unit, and left in the heat while her killer went grocery shopping. The surveillance footage that captured Harris driving her car became the key piece of evidence in a case that illustrated how neighbor disputes, left unchecked, can escalate from complaints to murder. Harris had been evaluated for anger management. The evaluation did not stop him. Wohlfarth tried to escape by moving. She ran out of time. Case 7. Dat Tien Du. Investigators examining Joanne Tran's car after her murder found a GPS tracking device hardwired directly to the vehicle's battery. The installation required mechanical knowledge and access to the engine compartment. Dat Tien Du, a tech worker with the skills to install such a device, had secretly placed the tracker on Tran's car and used it to monitor her movements for weeks. He knew where she went, when she left, and when she returned. On October 11, 2015, he used that information to ambush her as she walked to her car in Renton, Washington, and shot her 6 times. After killing her, Du fled to a friend's house, confessed to the murder, and attempted suicide with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He survived. The GPS tracker, the confession, and the text message threats Du had sent to Tran in the weeks before her death built a case that left no room for doubt. Dat Tien Du was born in 1978. He was 38 years old when he killed Joanne Tran. He worked in the tech industry and had the technical knowledge required to hardwire a GPS device to a car battery, a task that demanded both mechanical skill and access to the underside of the vehicle. Du and Tran had been engaged, but the relationship had ended after Tran fled due to severe physical abuse. Du had a documented history of domestic violence, and Tran had made the decision to leave him and start a new life. Du refused to accept the breakup. He began stalking her, sending threatening text messages, and ultimately installing the GPS tracker on her car without her knowledge. The tracker allowed him to monitor her every movement, creating a surveillance network that Tran had no way of detecting. Joanne Tran worked as a nail technician in Renton, Washington. She was 25 years old. She had fled her relationship with Dat Tien Du after enduring severe physical abuse, a decision that likely saved her life in the short term, but ultimately led to her death. Du's refusal to let her go, his insistence on maintaining control, and his use of technology to stalk her revealed a pattern common in domestic violence cases. The most dangerous moment for a victim is often when they try to leave. Tran had left. She had started rebuilding her life. Du decided that if he could not have her, no one would. On October 11, 2015, Dat Tien Du used the GPS data from the tracker he had installed on Joanne Tran's car to determine her location. He waited for her near her vehicle and ambushed her as she approached. He shot her 6 times. The attack was quick and brutal. Tran had no chance to defend herself. Thus, Du fled the scene immediately after the shooting. He drove to the home of a friend, walked inside, and confessed to what he had done. He told the friend he had killed Joanne Tran. Then he pulled out a gun and shot himself in an apparent suicide attempt. The self-inflicted wound was not fatal. Du was transported to a hospital, where he was treated and placed under arrest. The investigation moved quickly. Joanne Tran's body was found at the scene of the shooting. Police recovered evidence of the GPS tracker that had been hardwired to her car battery. The device was sophisticated and required deliberate installation, not something that could be placed casually or without the victim noticing if they inspected the engine compartment. Investigators also recovered text messages Du had sent to Tran in the weeks before the murder, messages that contained threats and revealed his obsessive need to control her. The friend to whom Du had confessed provided a statement to police, detailing Du's admission of guilt and his subsequent suicide attempt. The evidence was overwhelming. Tien Do was charged with first-degree murder. The case went to trial in 2017 in King County Superior Court. Rather than face a lengthy trial and the possibility of a harsher sentence, Du accepted a plea deal and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. In exchange, the prosecution agreed to recommend a sentence of 28 years in prison. The court accepted the plea, and Du was sentenced accordingly. There was no trial, no jury, and no prolonged legal battle. Du had confessed, the evidence supported the confession, and the plea deal brought the case to a resolution. Du is 46 years old and serves his sentence at Washington State Penitentiary. He will be eligible for release around 2043, after serving the majority of his sentence. Joanne Tran was 25 years old when she was shot 6 times by the man she had fled to escape. The GPS tracker hardwired to her car battery became a symbol of the ways in which technology has enabled domestic stalkers to monitor and control their victims. The device was not a simple magnetic tracker that could be placed under a bumper and removed easily. It was hardwired to the battery, a permanent installation that required technical knowledge and access to the vehicle's engine compartment. Du used his skills as a tech worker to create a surveillance system that allowed him to track Tran's every movement for weeks. The case highlighted the rising danger of cheap, commercially available GPS technology in the hands of abusers. A danger that has only grown in the years since Tran's death. Case 8, Mark Branch. In October 1988, the town of Greenfield, Massachusetts, made an unprecedented decision. They canceled Halloween. Children were told to stay inside. Trick-or-treating was called off. The reason was simple. A real-life Jason Voorhees was hiding in the woods. Mark Branch, a 19-year-old college dropout obsessed with slasher films, had dressed in a hockey mask and coveralls, broken into the home of 18-year-old Sharon Gregory, and stabbed her to death with a machete. He had fled into the woods surrounding Greenfield, and for 4 weeks, police conducted a massive manhunt through the forests, while the town lived in fear. Branch was found dead in the woods weeks later, having hanged himself. He was never arrested, never tried, and never convicted. But his case remains one of the most chilling examples of how obsession with horror films can cross the line from fantasy into fatal reality. Mark Branch was born in 1969 in Massachusetts. By 1988, he was 19 years old, a college dropout who had become increasingly socially isolated. He had no prior criminal record and no documented history of violence. What he did have was an all-consuming fascination with slasher films, particularly the Friday the 13th franchise. Branch fixated on the character of Jason Voorhees, the hockey-masked killer who terrorized Camp Crystal Lake in the films. For Branch, the boundary between watching horror and enacting it began to dissolve. He studied the films. He acquired a hockey mask and coveralls. He purchased a machete. On October 24, 1988, he decided to become Jason. Sharon Gregory was 18 years old, a college student majoring in psychology. She had met Mark Branch through mutual acquaintances, and she had taken an interest in his fascination with horror films as part of a school project. Gregory was studying the psychology of horror film fandom, and Branch's intense fixation on Friday the 13th made him a subject of academic curiosity. She engaged with him about his interests, asked him questions, and treated his obsession as something worth understanding. Branch interpreted that engagement as something more. He became fixated on Gregory, and his obsession with Jason Voorhees merged with his obsession with her. She was young, female, and had paid attention to him. That made her a target. On the night of October 24, 1988, Mark Branch dressed entirely as Jason Voorhees. He wore the hockey mask, the coveralls, and gloves. He carried a machete. He broke into Sharon Gregory's home in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and attacked her. He stabbed her repeatedly. The attack was brutal and sustained. When it was over, Sharon Gregory was dead. Branch fled into the woods surrounding the town. Sharon's twin sister discovered the body and called 911. The crime scene was horrific. Investigators found evidence that quickly led them to Branch. His car was located nearby, and inside it, police found bloodstains, a hockey mask, and a machete. The physical evidence linked Branch to the murder, but Branch himself had vanished into the woods. A massive manhunt began. Police searched the forests around Greenfield for 4 weeks. The search paralyzed the town. Parents kept their children inside. Schools held lockdown drills. Halloween approached, and the town made the decision to cancel the holiday. Trick-or-treating was called off. Children were told to stay indoors. The reason given was simple. A man dressed as Jason Voorhees had killed a young woman and was hiding in the woods. The town of Greenfield spent Halloween 1988 in fear, waiting for Mark Branch to be found. Weeks passed. Search teams combed the woods. On a cold November day, investigators found Branch's body hanging from a tree. He had committed suicide. The terror ended, but there was no trial, no conviction, and no opportunity for Sharon Gregory's family to see justice delivered in a courtroom. Mark Branch was 19 years old when he killed Sharon Gregory, and 19 years old when he took his own life in the woods. He was never formally charged, never tried, and never sentenced. His case exists in the record as a solved homicide with no living perpetrator. Sharon Gregory's twin sister found her body, a trauma that no sibling should endure. The town of Greenfield canceled Halloween, an event so rare that it became a defining moment in the community's history. The hockey mask and machete found in Branch's car, the props that became murder weapons, were recovered as evidence in a case that would never see a courtroom. Mark Branch's obsession with Friday the 13th and the character of Jason Voorhees crossed the line from fandom into psychosis, and Sharon Gregory paid for that crossing with her life. The case remains a cautionary tale about the ways in which media obsession, social isolation, and untreated mental illness can converge into violence. The town that canceled Halloween in 1988 has never forgotten the year a real-life Jason stalked the woods. Case 9. Vester Lee Flanagan Seg. On the morning of August 26, 2015, at 6:46 a.m., a television reporter and a cameraman were conducting a live interview at Bridgewater Plaza in Monetta, Virginia. The interview was being broadcast to thousands of viewers watching their morning news. Allison Parker, 24, held the microphone. Adam Ward, 27, operated the camera. Vicki Gardner, a local official, answered Parker's questions. None of them noticed the man approaching from the side until it was too late. Vester Lee Flanagan II, a former reporter who had been fired from the station years earlier, walked up to the crew, raised a Glock 19 handgun, and opened fire. He shot Allison Parker and Adam Ward on live television. Thousands of people watched the executions in real time. Flanagan had mounted a GoPro camera to his body and filmed the murders from his own point of view. He fled the scene, uploaded the footage to Twitter and Facebook, and faxed a 23-page manifesto to ABC News. Hours later, during a police chase on Interstate 66, he shot himself. He died at the hospital. The case became the first murder explicitly designed for social media algorithms, a crime committed not just publicly, but broadcast and shared by the killer himself. Vester Lee Flanagan II was born in 1973 in California. He used the professional alias Bryce Williams during his career as a television news reporter. He was 41 years old when he killed Allison Parker and Adam Ward. Flanagan had worked at multiple television stations throughout his career and had been fired from nearly all of them for aggressive behavior, workplace hostility, and inability to work with colleagues. He filed baseless discrimination lawsuits against employers, blamed others for his professional failures, and became increasingly paranoid and unstable. After being terminated from WDBJ, the station where Parker and Ward worked, Flanagan nursed his grievances for years. He monitored the station's broadcasts, stalked his former co-workers on social media, and tracked the locations of their live shots. His resentment was rooted in professional jealousy and a narcissistic inability to accept that he had been fired for legitimate reasons. He blamed Parker, Ward, and others at the station for his failures. He decided they should die. Allison Parker was 24 years old, a television reporter at WDBJ in Virginia. She was bright, ambitious, and well-liked by her colleagues. Adam Ward was 27 years old, a cameraman at the same station. He was engaged to be married and had his entire life ahead of him. Both had worked at WDBJ after Flanagan's termination, and neither had been directly involved in his firing. They were simply doing their jobs, conducting a routine morning interview, when Flanagan decided to kill them. Vicki Gardner, the woman being interviewed, was shot but survived her injuries. On the morning of August 26, 2015, Vester Flanagan monitored WDBJ's broadcast schedule and social media posts to determine where Allison Parker and Adam Ward would be conducting their live shot. He drove to Bridgewater Plaza in Moneta, Virginia, and waited. At 6:46 a.m., as the interview was being broadcast live, Flanagan approached the crew. He had a GoPro camera mounted on his body, recording his point of view. He raised his Glock 19 and fired multiple shots. Allison Parker was shot and killed. Adam Ward was shot and killed. Vicki Gardner was shot and wounded, but survived. The murders were broadcast live to thousands of viewers. People watching their morning news saw the reporter and cameraman gunned down on screen. The broadcast cut away, but the images had already been seen. Flanagan fled the scene in a rental car. As he drove, he uploaded the GoPro footage to his Twitter and Facebook accounts. The video showed his perspective as he raised the gun and fired. He wanted the world to see what he had done. He wanted control over the narrative. While en route, Flanagan also faxed a 23-page manifesto to ABC News. In it, he cited workplace grievances, compared himself to other mass shooters, and blamed his victims for his actions. Police identified Flanagan almost immediately. Station managers watching the live broadcast recognized him. A manhunt began. Hours later, Virginia State Police located Flanagan's rental car on Interstate 66. When officers attempted to stop the vehicle, Flanagan shot himself. The car veered off the road. Flanagan was transported to a hospital, where he was pronounced dead. There would be no trial, no conviction, and no opportunity for the families of Allison Parker and Adam Ward to confront him in court. Vester Lee Flanagan II is deceased. He died on August 26, 2015, hours after committing the murders, from a self-inflicted gunshot wound sustained during a police chase. Allison Parker and Adam Ward were killed on live television, their deaths witnessed by thousands of people eating breakfast and getting ready for work. The GoPro footage Flanagan uploaded to social media was viewed millions of times before the platforms removed it. The 23-page manifesto he sent to ABC News revealed a man consumed by grievance, narcissism, and rage. The case marked a turning point in the relationship between mass violence and social media. Flanagan did not just commit murder. He filmed it, uploaded it, and ensured that his perspective would be seen by as many people as possible. He designed the crime for virality, for algorithmic amplification, for infamy. 2 young journalists were killed because they worked at a television station that had fired a man who could not accept responsibility for his own failures. They pressed the button to go live. They never came home. Case 10. Yolanda Saldivar. Selena Quintanilla-Pérez ran into the lobby of the Days Inn in Corpus Christi, Texas, on March 31st, 1995, clutching her chest and bleeding from a gunshot wound to her back. Staff members rushed to help her. She told them the name of the person who had shot her, Yolanda. She gave them the room number. Then she collapsed. Paramedics arrived and transported her to a hospital, but the damage was too severe. Selena Quintanilla-Pérez, the 23-year-old Tejano music superstar, known simply as Selena, died from the gunshot wound. The woman she had named, Yolanda Saldivar, was the president of Selena's fan club and the manager of her boutiques. Saldivar had been embezzling money from Selena's businesses, and when Selena discovered the theft and arranged a meeting to confront her and retrieve financial records, Saldivar lured her to the motel with a false claim of having been raped. During the confrontation, as Selena attempted to leave the room, Saldivar shot her once in the back with a .38 caliber Taurus revolver. Saldivar then retreated to a red pickup truck in the motel parking lot and engaged in a 9.5-hour standoff with police, threatening suicide before finally surrendering. Yolanda Saldivar was born on September 19, 1960, in Texas. She was 34 years old when she killed Selena. Saldivar was a registered nurse and a devoted fan of Tejano music. She had founded Selena's fan club in the early 1990s and had worked her way into the singer's inner circle, eventually being promoted to manage Selena's clothing boutiques. Saldivar had a history of embezzling from previous employers, a pattern that would repeat itself with Selena's businesses. Despite the warning signs, Selena trusted Saldivar. That trust was a fatal mistake. Saldivar's attachment to Selena was intense and all-consuming. She wanted to be close to the singer, to be needed by her. And when Selena discovered the embezzlement and began to distance herself, Saldivar could not accept the loss. She decided that if she could not have access to Selena, no one would. Selena Quintanilla-Pérez was 23 years old and at the peak of her career. She was an international superstar, beloved in the Latin music community, and rapidly gaining crossover success in the English language market. She had just released her album, Amor Prohibido, and she was preparing to record her first English language album. She was married, adored by her family, and on the verge of becoming one of the biggest stars in the world. She had given Yolanda Saldivar significant responsibility, making her president of the fan club and manager of the boutiques. When family members raised concerns about missing money, Selena investigated and discovered that Saldivar had been embezzling funds. Selena arranged to meet Saldivar on March 31st, 1995, at the Days Inn in Corpus Christi, to retrieve financial records and terminate her employment. Saldivar lured Selena to the motel by claiming she had been raped and needed help. Selena, compassionate and trusting, went to support her. On March 31st, 1995, at 11:48 a.m., Selena arrived at the Days Inn to meet Yolanda Saldivar. The two women argued about the embezzlement. Selena demanded the financial records. Saldivar stalled and deflected. When it became clear that Selena was going to leave and that the relationship was over, Saldivar pulled out a .38 caliber Taurus revolver and shot Selena once in the back as she walked toward the door. The bullet severed an artery. Selena ran from the room, made it to the lobby, and named Yolanda Saldivar and the room number before collapsing. She was transported to a hospital where doctors attempted to save her life. The blood loss was too severe. Selena Quintanilla-Pérez was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Yolanda Saldivar did not flee. She retreated to a red pickup truck in the motel parking lot, locked the doors, and pointed the gun at her own head. Police surrounded the vehicle. A hostage negotiator made contact with Saldivar and began trying to talk her into surrendering. The standoff lasted 9.5 hours. Saldivar threatened to kill herself. She ranted about her relationship with Selena, about the accusations of embezzlement, and about how she had been treated. Negotiators worked to keep her talking. Finally, after more than 9 hours, Saldivar agreed to surrender. She exited the truck and was arrested. She was charged with first-degree murder. The trial took place in October 1995. Due to the intense media coverage and the outpouring of grief in Corpus Christi, the trial was moved to Houston. Judge Westergren presided over the proceedings. The prosecution presented Selena's dying declaration, which was legally admissible as evidence. Selena had named Yolanda and the room number in her final moments, and that statement was powerful evidence of Saldivar's guilt. Prosecutors also introduced the .38 caliber Taurus revolver, the embezzled checks and financial records, and expert testimony about the gun. Forensic experts testified that the Taurus revolver required 11 pounds of pressure to pull the trigger, effectively disproving the defense's claim that the gun had gone off accidentally. The defense argued that Saldivar and Selena had struggled over the gun, and that it had discharged unintentionally. The jury was not persuaded. On October 23, 1995, the jury convicted Yolanda Saldivar of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Yolanda Saldivar is 63 years old. She is incarcerated at the Mountain View Unit in Gatesville, Texas. She became eligible for parole in March 2025, having served 30 years. Her first parole hearing is pending. A chilling detail emerged in the years after her conviction. Saldivar keeps a picture of Selena in her prison cell. After 30 years, the woman who shot Selena in the back still maintains a shrine to her victim. Selena's family has opposed Saldivar's parole, and the Latin music community continues to mourn the loss of a star whose career was cut short at 23. The embezzlement that triggered the murder was never fully recovered. The betrayal was absolute. Yolanda Saldivar was Selena's biggest fan, the president of her fan club, and the manager of her boutiques. She was given access and trust, and when that access was threatened, she chose murder. Selena Quintanilla-Pérez named her killer with her dying breath. Whether Yolanda Saldivar will walk free remains to be seen.